Hello and welcome to this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, Dee Brown, CEO. Joining me today is a lifelong Peorian. He's a retired Marine, retired detective, and entrepreneur. Please help me welcome Ron Givens Sr. to Self-Made. Ron, I'm glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Now, Ron, 23 years in the military.
Yes, sir.
22 years as a detective.
Yes, sir.
And currently you're an entrepreneur.
Yes, sir.
And you lived your entire life right here in Peoria, Illinois. So just to set the stage for the viewers, just talk to me about your early life here. What was it like growing up as a child?
Well, I thought that I had both my parents, which was unusual back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
And neither one of them had much more than a high school education. Both of them graduated from Peoria High, as did I. Peoria High School, one of the oldest schools now in the state. But I grew up on the number streets, which was 6th Street. And my life, I thought, was good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Peoria. I enjoyed having the funds of riding to pick my dad up, who worked at Caterpillar with my mom every day at 3:30 across the bridge. He worked over at East Peoria. So we would, my sisters, 2 sisters and I younger, would pile in the car and go over there and watch the fellows leave Caterpillar at the time. But my summers were just absolutely great. It was back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s when, kids could stay out until 9 o'clock.
Right.
One of the big things was, and I was making mention of this earlier, is that at that time, the Warner Homes, which is no longer there, had a curfew whistle. And that curfew whistle would blow at 9 o'clock, and you either had to be on your porch
Right.
or 2 steps off the porch, or getting ready to get on the porch back in those days.
Yeah.
And the police would actually pick you up. There was and get you home, or find out why you were out, and that went on for years. But I recall many times in my backyard at 612 West 6th Street. I'm old enough to remember that they actually changed the numbering system on the blocks back then. And our original house number was 612 to 708. And that was a city, and the renewal programs coming through Peoria at that time. But the most important thing was that was actually one fall year when I was 13 years old. I was raking leaves in the back with my father, and I decided to ask him some questions about his life growing up. And his family basically came from Mississippi, and he had a very successful life, and he was educated, and so were most of his family. And so I decided it was a proper time for me to find out more about his family. And I had been rambling through his drawers one day, and I saw some of the medals that he had won from the Army. And so while we were raking leaves, I said to my dad, I said, how did you get those? And he started telling me the story. And the end result was I found out that he ended up being a corporal in the Army back then. And of course, then African Americans didn't move up too far within the ranks, and he was actually the driver of the general. He drove a general around during his time period there in Italy. He was actually a chauffeur for the general. And I know that as we were growing up, he always astounded me with his ability to drive a car.
Yeah.
So it kind of grew into the conversation of, well, how did you get promoted? And he said, well, basically, I was there long enough and I did a good enough job that the general decided I should be promoted. So he went from a PFC private to a corporal, which was a pretty good rank back there,
right,
for African Americans.
Right.
And so at that point, as he talked, and I listened to a lot to what my dad said growing up, and I sure miss him still today. And I think he would be proud of some of the accomplishments that I have had. But I made up my mind that I was going to go into the service. And at that point, I started what is now called the bucket list. And back then, it was just a plan. And I'm 13 years old, and I decided that.
So you made the decision
to
go to the military at the age of 13.
To become a Marine.
Oh, so you knew exactly what branch?
I knew exactly what branch I wanted to get into.
Was your dad a Marine?
No, he was in the Army.
Okay.
And I knew also from that part of the conversation that I wanted to be higher ranked than him.
Okay.
And as the story goes on, I actually retired from the Marine, as you said earlier, and I ended up being an E7, which was a gunnery sergeant, pretty high up in the Marine Corps rank system.
So talk to me though about before we get to the Marine. You were an athlete in high school.
Yes.
And I know you've been honored for your accomplishments in athletics as well. So talk to me about high school and the athletics that you participated in.
Well, I went into high school obviously as a freshman, Peoria High. Loved it. I played football, and the first year, and I'm pretty much the same size and height, except for a little bit of difference because of shrinking as age. But I was a little guy, and but I had a lot of fire, and I was pretty tough. And so they moved me up from my freshman year, when there was like 70 football players, to go to what they call the fresh soft position, or actually the fresh soft games, which was a combination of sophomores and freshmen.
Right.
And I got to be a starting guard, and of course, if you know anything about football, guards are usually fairly good-sized guys.
Right.
And
right.
Long story short is I played well enough there that they dressed me for varsity. At 5'6" and 145 pounds, I was
playing guard.
Yeah, I was playing guard. So I ended up going through football and becoming one of the conference standouts, and I received a couple of awards when I graduated for football from a couple of colleges around here. And that decision was made by me to say, I don't think I'm big enough. And I looked at those guys at Bradley at the time, when Bradley had a football, here in Peoria, had a football team. And I looked at those guys being 6'6", 6'7", and I thought, they'll kill me. So I said, I'm not going to do that. But I made the decision to go to school anyway. But I also wrestled. I placed several times, second, third, or first in wrestling at 145 pounds, wrestling in high school.
That's interesting. I have a son that was a wrestler in high school, in the same weight class. He was a state champion. Wrestler, yeah.
And I accomplished a lot there, and it gave me a lot of pride. And then, of course, the spring sports were track and things like that. So I was still pretty fast, so I was on the relay team for track in the spring, I guess you'd call it. But I enjoyed high school. In fact, I'm coming up September 13th or 14th this year. We're having our 55th class reunion, and I'm proud to say that I liked high school to the point where even now I still keep in contact with my classmates, and I've been on every class reunion since we got out of high school. Was one of the members putting it together.
So talk to me about you graduated from high school.
Yes, sir.
And you've made the decision to go to the military. So do you go to where do you matriculate?
I went to that was the first year of Illinois Central College.
Okay.
When I got out, and so I went to Illinois Central College, and I had a break in between my second year of college and the Marine Corps. I knew that the Vietnam War was going on at the time. I did want to finish my college, and I did want to participate, obviously, for the country. So I actually put college on hold for a little bit, took off and went to the Marine Corps, stayed in there for 7 years on active duty, and then came back and finished my college. And from that point farther, then it basically became, what do I want to do? Because my mind had already been set because of the plan to someday be in business. So I'm still working my plan. I mean, I was in the Marine Corps. I wanted to be a policeman, which is part of that plan.
Yeah.
I wanted to work with my son, which is part of that plan. And all that comes from the part of being 13 years old. I wanted to drive stock cars, race cars. I wanted to drive Daytona 500 racetrack, NASCAR, and just be in business. So in 2012, basically that plan, which we call the bucket list, was all completed. I was able to accomplish each one of those, and I'm sure you'll ask me, what happened with them, and I'm more than happy to tell you. I had a great life. I've had a great life. At 75 years old right now, I'm just living the dream, and it's been so good. My son runs the companies.
So let's so before we get there, so let's go back to the military.
Mm-hmm.
So you spent 23
Years.
Years in the Marine, and in the Marines, and then talk to me about the Marines and some of the experiences you had while you were.
Well, I started out, like I said, at the when I actually got into the active duty piece of it, it was at the end of Vietnam. So my duty station was, believe it or not, Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii, and at the time the job that I had was to modify all of the gun racks that we had. Then we were using M14s, and the M16 had just come out. So I was put in control of a machine area that revamped all of the gun racks back then. So they would ship them into our shop, and then we would redo them so that they would fit the M16 A1. Then, of course, later on, because of the decisions that they made with the A1, it became the A2. So, again, we had to modify some of those. But I was sent from there to Norway. And I spent several months over there in Norway, and the cave system over there is quite large. And in that cave system over there, which I think I can say now, is they're the size of cities. And a lot of the equipment was stored over there, and that equipment that's stored over there was surplus equipment. And we worked with the Norwegians to repair, or what we used to call demolish, which means get rid of it. If it wasn't serviceable, it was put on a barge and unfortunately taken out of the cave and destroyed. But I think the fact that I became a cold weather Marine, they trained us to live in cold weather environments. And at the time, again, because of Vietnam and because there was a potential threat that Russia would come into the United States through that doorway there in Norway, we had defensive positions over there too. So we worked during the day and protected during the night is what it amounts to. And I remember sleeping out there and having several different things happen to you. I don't know if you've ever been in the mountains, but out there, the most extensive thing that I would remember is we look at a bush and we think of a bush as we do today, and that's actually the top of a tree. And that tree may be 10, 12 feet because the snow had built up. And you'd walk over there. If you did not walk over there with your snowshoes on, you would go down. We had a couple of people do that, and of course there was rescue procedures to do it, but we got to calling it snow snakes because of the fact of the danger, and you wanted to make sure you did not venture too far from the rest of us as we moved through there.
So talk to me about your law enforcement career. What actually, I guess, motivated you to want to have a career in law enforcement? Because you mentioned that you started or you made a decision to do that at a very, very early age. So what was your inspiration there?
Well, I knew that, again, just like the interview that I did when they interviewed us back to become police officers, I wanted to help people. And I still do today. And I thought, the police part of it is very, very helpful. I looked at police officers back then as people who helped us. And so I decided that, again, as part of my bucket list, that I wanted to be a police officer. And that was pretty much the extent of it. I didn't have any other motives for it. The police officers that were around here, they're African American. There was only a few of them on the police department at the time. And I had done fairly well on all of the tests. In fact, when it shook itself out, finally I was number 2 on the test back then. And so I immediately, the first time tested, I immediately got on the police department. And it was just, it was an opportunity for me to share what I thought was a good job, share what I thought as a homeboy, helping in the community. And over the years, we actually did that. I mean, I did have one incident where I took someone's life because of a hostage situation. You asked me earlier about that. I had to take a man's life because he was holding some children in a house, and when I arrived there, he came after me with two cooking forks, those long-handled, we call them barbecue forks, and he tried to kill me, and he backed me in the corner, and I told him not to make me do this, but he said, "I don't care." So that was bad, and at the time, my son was only 8 years old, and I wanted to see my son, so unfortunately, that young man is not here right now, and I am. But
how did that impact you as an officer?
Well,
outside of just an officer, but I think even just personally, what type of impact did that incident have on you?
Well, I think about it. I mean, under those circumstances, there's certain things that happen on a police department that they award you medals or whatever, and I received the Valor Award for standing there and taking the action that I did, because there was nothing else I could do, and of course, it was tragic, but by the same set of circumstances, my training from the Marine Corps and various other things kept me focused on what was going on. And sometimes when you're faced with a threat like that, you need to make sure that you keep your head. And some of the conversations were with the dispatch, the way that I called it in, is they said, "Well, Ron, you sound just like you normally sound on the radio," but they didn't know.
Right. They didn't know.
They didn't know how I felt inside. And as far as affecting me now, it does not, but I can talk about it.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I didn't talk of it, not because I was afraid to, just because some people don't understand. They thought, well, you killed somebody with a fork, and if you ever look at those two-time barbecue forks, they're pretty sharp. And there was all this, and I had a vest on, but he was 6 foot. He was 6'2", and once I backed into that corner, there was nothing else. So I only relived it once, and it was actually the night of the incident, later that night when I got home. So the impact of it has been that my wife and family all know what happened, and I don't have any residual thought about it too much. I'm mentioning it now basically because you ask, and I know that I did the right thing. So no, I don't have a problem with it.
But now, while you were in law enforcement, you worked violent crimes.
Yes,
right?
For juveniles.
For juveniles.
And that was bad. That was bad because we saw everything from child abuse cases to innocent children shooting and killing their family members. Most of it at that time was accidental, because weapons were left out, or children had mystery of that weapon and ended up thinking that it's like on television, point a gun at somebody and pull the trigger. They don't realize that is real. And there are a number of cases that we investigated where it really was an accident, but the kids, when they're 6, 7, 8 years old, they think that their brother or sister is going to come back, and they don't.
Right.
And it's a very difficult situation to interview those children to get the truth out of it. And of course, I was always one that was kind of a stickler for charging the parents, and it was hard. It was very hard. And then I had a lot of compassion too. You know, I mean, you asked me about some of the cases, people that would abuse their animals. I would probably take a hard line towards those individuals. And I became, as an what they call an additional duty, I was also the city arson investigator. So I arrested people for arson, and in some cases, people got arrested for setting fires that took lives of people here in that city.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. It was an interesting time frame for me.
Well, I know you mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you were a racer.
Yes.
Also. So tell us about that, because you don't look like a racer to me. So.
I was doing a lot of things when I was in high school, like you were talking about. I loved football. I loved all the things that were going on. But one summer in the late 50s, my uncle, we were having a family event, and my uncle took me to the very first stock car race. He asked both me and my cousin if we wanted to go. My cousin said no. And we have a racetrack here. The original racetrack here was called Peorian Speedway. And it's out on Pioneer Parkway right now. And so I went out there with him. Those old 49 and 39 old bucket cars with numbers on them, just it pulled my heart. And I've been involved with it ever since. And currently I have one. Today I have a NASCAR that I built. I keep it over at my shop, or over at the company there in Pekin, Illinois, and we take that car and we use it for displaying. But I raced at Peoria Speedway, I raced at Davenport, I raced at East Moline, so the Midwest circuit at
But
the
you
time.
were honored for racing, right? So
Yes.
What honor did you receive?
I received here at the riverfront. I received the African American Hall of Fame honor for being the first African American racing person here, which is down at the Riverfront Museum. And unbeknownst to me, that shortly after that, I was also put into the Racing Hall of Fame out at Peoria Speedway. They have a Hall of Fame racing for the top drivers and stuff out there. And I was placed into that in the same year of 2019. When
Congratulations.
So,
Congratulations. And I don't want to end this show without getting an opportunity to talk about the entrepreneur side of what you do. So you have several businesses.
Yes,
so
sir.
just kind of briefly tell me about each of your businesses.
Well, the latest business that we have is that we have what I call wood pallets by design, and that is a scenario where we specifically, if you give us some specs or you want to ship something, we build up wood pallets for shipping or whatever out of wood, and we'll design that pallet if you don't have a design for it. And that business has really taken off. It's only 3 years old. And we started with one wood pallet, and now we have 31 different designs of wood pallets, so that if Mr. Brown comes to us and he says, I want a pallet this size for ship to Norway, Vietnam, whatever, then we can build that pallet for you within a day.
Wow, okay.
And so that's really taken off. And of course, one of our major trading partners here locally takes advantage of that, because it saves them money, and they know that they can get the product or products. Most of the time, it's 10 to 15 to 20 at a time that they want.
But you're also in construction as well, right?
I'm going to get to that one.
Okay.
Because the construction one was the second one that going backwards. Now, this is going backwards to what I originally started in. The second business that we built was in 2010. And 2010 is the company called Givesco Construction. And Givesco Construction is a build design company that we started back then merely to offset our other business line, which was JM Industrial Supply, to augment that. And because I became 8A certified and went through 9 years of certification with the SBA, Small Business Administration, I knew that I needed to diversify. And so we built a gift construction company up to where now it has over 30 people working in it.
Okay.
And those 30 people work all over the state of Illinois and to Iowa, into Missouri. And I want to get into Wisconsin, but we haven't done much work there. We've done a little, but not much as I want. But we work at the major government installations. For instance, here in Peoria, we are partnered up with another large company to do a training center out here at the 182nd National Guard, where we built a building out there. And we went from there down to Springfield, Illinois, where we built a similar one. You know, the government has a duplication program. And so we went to Springfield, built that building down there. And then we also have been down at Scott Air Force Base, which is the central command system for the airport.
Right.
I mean, for the Air Force.
Yep.
So we're still down there. We've been down there over 17 years.
Wow.
Working.
Now, Ron, we are about to run out of time,
okay.
but I want to take the opportunity to say, number one, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Both in the military and in law enforcement. What you all do every day, we take for granted the liberties that we enjoy and the freedoms we enjoy because of people like you who have dedicated their lives to protecting those freedoms and liberties. So thank you so much for being on Self-Made. I appreciate having you. And to my viewers, thank you for watching this episode of Self-Made with Dee Brown CEO. And remember, without you, there's no me.